bicycle for his first ride for peace. He was full of hope, and that is our mood here today also, if we can hold in our minds that dual emotion. Franklin Delano Roosevelt declared to the nation the purpose of World War II. What should the world be like or become after that horrendous war against the Nazis and fascists? And he proposed the 4 freedoms: from want, from fear, of freedom of religion, and freedom of speech. 2 ofs, 2 froms. And that was not just for the United States of America, but every time in his speech before the Congress, he said, and all the world, each time, of freedom of speech for all the world, freedom from fear for all the world. Tomorrow is a continuation of Roosevelt's great 4 freedoms of hope. The United Nations International Day of Peace. It's the 30th anniversary of this great day of peace. And the theme this year is the right of peoples to peace. And I'll innovate a little and say that this is the 5th freedom. Freedom for peace. Freedom of peace, to add to Roosevelt's 4 freedoms, which actually amount to, culminate in peace, or the hope of peace.
Yes. No innocent lives.
Thank you, Aubrey.
I have to say hallelujah, brother.
Hello, brother.
Hallelujah.
I know. Freedom from war is what Roosevelt hoped for. The United Nations Climate Change Summit is also tomorrow, the 21st. So we have 2 great United Nations events occurring tomorrow. And the United Nations and Ban Ki-moon have called to the leaders of the world to recognize the consequences of climate change, that the consequences of climate change will result in war. And wars, as Fran said so well in her last column, as she concluded her last column, will lead to chaos and war if we don't have mitigation and adaptation adequate. Ban Ki-moon has spent the entire year, and his entire staff, traveling the country for tomorrow to make sure the leaders of the world and the people of the United States are rallying for this response to climate change. Is it reported in the newspaper? Did you know he was doing that? I'll bet not. I never saw him mention it.
There are 3 buses from Arkansas going to
We know that. We know that, and we're here to celebrate. Thank you. We're here to celebrate that because, and that's what Fran will be talking about. The summit and the march, a people's call to President Obama to bring to action, to something to do, to an adequate response to climate change. And some scholars have suggested we need the equivalent of the New Deal of the 1930s. We need the equivalent of the Marshall Plan, and both together will produce $500 billion, which is, I think, probably just the beginning of the amount of money we need. So Fran, thank you. Fran is here to tell about the march, to tell about the preparation for the march, and maybe to have heard from Edward Hetmanick on his way to New York City. I hope so. Fran Alexander.
People's Climate March has been billed as an invitation to change everything. For those of us unable to make the trip to New York City, we can join them in spirit today as our fellow Arkies continue their bus ride to attend the People's Climate March tomorrow morning, where they'll start at 11:30, and they'll start on the west side of Central Park near the Natural Museum of History and the Lincoln Center, and they will continue past Columbus Circle and Times Square and end at 11th and 34th Streets, some 2.5 miles throughout the city. Dick has told you why at this time the march is occurring, because of the UN summit, and the Secretary Ban Ki-moon will be in attendance. He says he will join the march. Over 1,500, now think about this, 1,500 businesses, unions, faith groups, schools, social justice groups, environmental groups, and more are all working together to make this march happen. It's centered on justice. It's committed to principles of environmental justice and equality, representing the communities that are being hit the hardest by climate change. Our refugee problem is going to really exponentially leap when the coastal cities are beginning to be flooded. The Arkansas Connection, I'd like to tell you all about Edward Hitmanic. I don't know how many of you know Edward, but when he learned about the march, he really wanted to go, and then he found out that there were no buses scheduled to be leaving from Arkansas, and so he thought, well, I guess I'm going to have to do it myself. And so about the time he found that out, he found out, I guess online somewhere, that another fella in Little Rock, Donald Walter, was also wanting to go and thinking about being a captain of a bus. And he is a full-time doctor at Children's Hospital. So Donald and Edward made connections. They joined forces and became co-captains of what is now 2 buses, not 3 unfortunately, but 2 buses, and they have left from Little Rock. Edward, among his many coordinations he had to do, was to get people together here in Northwest Arkansas to make the trip to Little Rock Thursday night. He made accommodations possible in Little Rock for those folks because they left at 5:30 yesterday morning. And Donald had his 22-year-old daughter along with him. They wanted to make sure there was great diversity on the buses in age, gender, race, economic levels, political opinions, so forth. But they knew that even the very cheap price of $260 for both the bus ride and accommodations, if you shared a room with 4 people, would be difficult to some people. So they began fundraising, and they were able to therefore subsidize or cover the cost of many of the attendees. Edward decided that he would just take off from his work and concentrate on this march and getting people on those buses. And first he said he'd take a month off, and then it turned into 6 weeks. And he wrote letters, he called people, he put up posters, he sat at booths. He held a fundraiser at Scarpino's with musicians that volunteered their time, and he made $3,100 that night to supplement some of the riders. In addition, several people who could not go sponsored seats for other people. One 17-year-old girl from Eureka Springs wanted to go to the march as her 18th birthday present, and her 15-year-old sibling wanted to go along. The parents, Edward did not want to be in charge of 2 minors in New York City. They didn't know, and her parents didn't think they could afford to send 4 of them to New York. And as it turned out, one woman had a medical problem come up, and her seat went to the father, so all 4 of the family are on the bus. The bookings went up and down. Edward, he said he had to have been very naive to take on this project. And Edward and Donald both wanted to save those 56 seats on one bus. They wanted to save most of those for Arkansas people, but they got calls from Tennessee in particular, just almost demanding to let them on, but they were holding them off. And then one day the bus was filled, and so people were still asking about going, so they made the leap of faith and took great risk and effort, and they filled another bus. So they let the Tennessee folks on. They got a call from Sewanee, which is the University of the South. Ironically, it's just to the east of Fayetteville, Tennessee, and that university wanted to sponsor 10 students for the march, and so they picked them up in Nashville yesterday. A man from West Memphis who could not leave his work, but his wife and 3 children wanted to go, and he bought them tickets and asked Edward, please take care of my family. Another passenger, Robert McAfee, you may know, some of you may know, he's a climatologist who lives south of Fort Smith, and he served on the governor's climate change research committee. He helped secure seats for people from rural South Arkansas that the Arkansas Public Policy Panel was aware wanted to go to the march, but they couldn't afford it. Also, part of the organizing of the trip meant that they had to, like I said before, get people to Little Rock. Edward and Donald had talked to each other every day, sometimes several times a day, for 6 weeks. They never laid eyes on each other until yesterday morning at 5:30 at the bus. Edward swore that he was the wrong guy for this job. He says, I have no cell phone, and I don't do Facebook. So he thought it couldn't possibly happen. They also arranged a stop at the Climate Change Science Institute at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee to break the trip, and they stopped there yesterday afternoon, and Donald told me that it was extremely successful, that they were very informative, and they were very gracious to them and gave them a wonderful tour. This trip was not a casual nor easy effort. Each bus meant $11,200 had to be raised from tickets or donations. Donations made up half of those seats possible. Not everyone was helpful. For example, one church here in town was so supportive they announced the bus availability in their church newsletter. But another said no way would their members want to hear about such stuff. It was difficult to post a recruit at the University of Arkansas campus, and to Edward's knowledge, no Fayetteville campus students are on either bus. However, UCA has 20 students on the bus. In addition, at least 2 couples from Fayetteville and 1 couple from Huntsville are flying to New York, and another Fayettevillean that I know about, I certainly don't know about all of the folks who may be going, is on the bus that left from Omaha, where she was visiting, so she hitched a ride from Omaha. People have organized transportation from 30 states and Canada via train, bus, car, van, or plane. And I imagine some are even riding their bikes. So if nothing changed yesterday, when they left Little Rock, Arkansas is sending 2 buses containing 112 people. 11 of them are between the ages of 13 and 17, but the age spread reaches into the 70s. Passengers are divided almost evenly by gender, with women slightly outnumbering the men.
All right, women.
At least 2 marchers are Hispanic, several are black. On board are folks from 6 states, 1 from Oklahoma, 1 from Missouri, 20 from Tennessee, 1 from Mississippi, 1 from Alabama, and 88 from Arkansas. As a footnote, although sad, it should be mentioned that Texas is only sending 1 van of 15 people to the march. At least that's all that's listed on the website. This is an invitation to change everything. With our future online and the whole world watching, we'll take a stand to bend the course of history. We'll take to the streets to demand the world we know is within our reach, a world with an economy that works for people and the planet, a world safe from the ravages of climate change, a world with good jobs, clean air and water, and healthy communities. We should be very proud of Arkansas, and can, because a couple of guys